Hi friends, welcome to the She Report. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And for those who are returning, thank you so much for your faithfulness. Be sure to share this channel with others to get them involved as well, because we need as many active citizens as possible. So with that being said, the title of this video is called Christians Get Involved. And this is basically aimed towards religious people or Christians. Anyone can see this, but this is the audience that I'm speaking to are Christians, people who say they believe in God, who are religious. And the reason why I want to talk about this topic, because a couple Fridays ago, some friends and I were out and about, and we were talking to different people, trying to encourage them to get involved, because we definitely have a crisis on our hand. We're feeling a lot of effects fiscally, financially. We're feeling it in our pockets for sure. So we're trying to get people involved, and we're seeing not only are things happening to us financially, but things are happening all over the world, and we could become collateral damage. So I was wanting people to get involved. We're just trying to encourage people to get involved, call your elected officials, X, Y, and Z. So some of them were a part of a certain religious group. I'm not going to name them. And they were very anti-getting involved. And I know that there's some Christians that say, nope, I'm not going to worry about it. God's coming back. Things are going to work out. It's going to take care of itself. And then you also have some Christians who feel, I want to get involved. Should I get involved? How should I get involved? I don't know if I should. Well, this video is to answer that question. Yes, Christians get involved. You need to get involved. And I'm going to talk about some Christians that were in the Bible and believers of God that were in the Bible that were actually political officials and that were involved. So first things first, I'm going to talk about Joseph. There's plenty of them, but I'm going to mention Joseph first, which was, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He was Jacob's son. So Joseph, he was actually second in line to Pharaoh, which is the king of Egypt. So at the time, Joseph was in jail for something that he didn't do at all. He was falsely accused by, we're going to call it the modern day Me Too movement, a woman. Anyway, he was falsely accused, ended up in jail. So there, the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had a dream. He had this very unique dream. So Joseph gets called in. I'm going to fast forward. I'm not going to go through every single detail, but Joseph was called in to interpret the dream. And Joseph told Pharaoh that there's going to be 7 good years. It's going to be so prosperous, so amazing. We're going to have so many things, prosperous, plenty. Okay. And then there's going to be 7 bad years. So he gave him some wisdom. He interpreted the dream and he gave him wisdom. Joseph gave Pharaoh some wisdom and said, we need to prepare. Those 7 years that are plentiful are going to be nothing to compare to how the 7 bad years are going to be. It's going to be so bad, those 7 years, that the 7 good years are going to be like, did they even happen? So what we need to do is prepare during the 7 good years, store up food, prepare so that we have plenty, so we won't be famished for those 7 bad years. So the reason why I'm telling you that story is because of Joseph interpreting the dream, and Pharaoh was very impressed. He's like, I'm going to make you second in command for me. So Joseph ended up becoming a political official, and it was actually for the betterment of his nation, which would ultimately become Israel. So it was beneficial for his family that was way back home. They ended up coming to Egypt and reaping from the benefits of Joseph's interpretation of the dream and Joseph's power as well, because remember, he's second in command. So without Joseph getting involved in political things, his relatives back home and a whole country would have been famished. They would have been starving. So his wisdom and him getting involved ultimately helped other people. It benefited him and other people. So that's one example of why you should get involved in politics, because Ultimately, everything comes full circle and it affects you, whether it's directly or indirectly, and you could become collateral damage. Another one is Paul. So we're going to talk about someone in the New Testament. We all know Paul is an apostle. God chose him to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, and he was amazing at it. But there were certain times during Paul's life when he was traveling through preaching to Gentiles that he went before kings. King Agrippa went through a lot of different politicians. In Rome, he was ultimately brought towards Rome. And when they were trying him and falsely accusing him of different things, he brought forth his Roman citizenship. So he used a political aspect of his life. His Roman citizenship would be the same concept as us using the Constitution, our constitutional rights. So Paul, being a wonderful apostle, preaching the gospel to so many people, trying to get them to heaven, used his Roman citizenship, used politics to show the way or to make his point or to show what they were doing to him was unjust because he was a Roman citizen. So those are two examples, two male examples, both in the one in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. So let's wrap this thing up with a woman. So we have all heard of Esther. And we've all heard of the wonderful verse, Esther 4:14. Lots of people like to quote the end part of it, which I have a paper here. I will show it to you momentarily. But a lot of people like to quote that verse, the end portion. They say, how do you know that you didn't come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So I'm not going to go through the whole story of that either, but Esther was chosen to be a replacement for Queen Vashti during the Persian Empire, and she was a very beautiful woman. So she was chosen for that. And there was a wicked man named Haman that got all flustered because Mordecai would not bow to him and worship him. So he got all hung up on this one man and wanted to exterminate a whole entire ethnicity of people, whole entire nation, because just of one person. He was so vain, all caught up into himself. He wanted to get rid of people. Kind of sounds familiar, depopulating people, except during that time he wanted to have gallows. Now we have these experimental jabs wanting to depopulate people. It kind of sounds familiar. But anyway, I digress. So Haman gets these gallows built. Mordecai finds out, and everything he goes to Esther. Okay? And let's pop the paper on, and I'm going to point out a few things, and then we'll come back here. So let me get this paper on for you to see.
Okay, so here's this wonderful paper I was talking about Mordecai and Esther. So let's start here. So history starts with this narcissistic psychopath, Haman. He's a high-level official who goes to the king and bribes him. That sounds familiar, almost like Mendez. Very, very familiar, doesn't it? Politicians get bribed today. So he bribes the king with approximate money in today's value, $225 million. He says, pass this law. So the king thinks this is a wonderful law that's going to be passed. But the people don't know that Haman's being sinister and he's wanting to depopulate them. He wants to kill the Jews. So even Esther doesn't even know. She had to be told. Mordecai had to send a letter to her and tell her what's going on. So her response is, I'm fearful, I'm scared. So Mordecai says to her, you know what? Don't you think that just because you're the queen, that this isn't going to affect you? He says, for altogether, if you hold your peace, if you don't say anything at this time, how do you know? How do you know that you are not meant to be here for this time? Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? He says, just because you're the queen doesn't mean that you're not going to be affected. So she did something about it. One purpose of this wonderful paper is because a lot of people think that they can't do anything about it, when really you actually can. So I'm going to hop back on.
So as I was saying, Mordecai says to Esther, he says, don't think this isn't going to affect you. You're a Jew too. It's going to affect you and your house. Just because you won a beauty contest doesn't mean anything. So get to work. How do you know that you were not meant to be here for such a time as this? So she gets to work, even though she's scared. She's thinking, I can't do anything. But she tried and actually delivered thousands and thousands of people from being slaughtered, from being depopulated for a terrible reason. So that is another reason why you should get involved, because like I said, things can affect you directly and indirectly. In this case, this was a direct effect. So that is my explanation when people say, should Christians get involved? Yes, Christians definitely need to get involved. Another thing that I wanted to point out, when people say, oh, I'm not going to worry about it. Jesus is going to take care of it. Jesus is coming back. Well, let me say this. Let's say your water goes out tonight. Yes, Jesus is still coming back, but do you still need to take a shower? Do you still need to drink water? Are you still going to take care of things? The answer is yes. So you still do things when things go wrong in this life, because we still have to live here. So I wanted to point that out. It's a bunch of nonsense. People are lazy. A lot of Christians or religious people are lazy. They think they're going to fly out of here when they're not. We're all affected by it. We all need to get involved. We all need to stand strong, because the more people that are strong and that are good, that have good morals and good values, we can actually make a change like Esther did. She made a change. So that's my answer to those who are curious if Christians or have the question, should Christians get involved? Share this video with people who think that they shouldn't get involved if they're a Christian or religious person. They need to know this, because we, like I said before, we need more active citizens. So I'll see you all in the next video, and thank you so much for joining.